Welcome back, everybody, and this, I guess, is part 2 to episode 2 of the garage build, and it starts right off with us getting that first wall hung that you saw us put together in the last video. If you didn't go watch it now after you're done with this video. But we've basically already laid out our walls. We're going to then use the Kubota to stand them up, and since we have our string lines around the perimeter from our earlier layout, all we have to do is butt our post just up to that string line, level them up with that Stabila plate level that can reach 12 feet in the air. That way we're consistently level from top to bottom. And then we go and stand up our corners. So we like to stand up the intermediate post first, then come behind it and put up the corners. And these 2x6 columns have 4 lag bolts and 2 1/2-inch through bolts, top and bottom of the bracket. So once we get one wall up, we'll go right to the other wall. Not much difference. This is a 40 foot long building, and typically we can go 56 foot. So we can set a 56 foot long building all at one time with the machine pictured. So that has a lifting capacity of about 5,000 pounds. I don't know what it is with my boom all the way out, but I've never had an issue lifting walls up to 18 foot tall and 56 foot long. And when you got Greg there lifting wall post by himself, you don't even need the Kubota. But obviously we like to work smarter and harder, but not hurt ourselves. Well, there we go. The 2 side walls usually go up the easiest. Once we get the main post in, we'll always come behind. We'll throw the corners up. The reason we leave those off is, well, first off, we can't lay them down with this post in our way, so either we shift the whole building over and lay it out next to these brackets, but for consistency's sake we like to lay it out in the brackets and then measure the top so everything is nice and square. So it's easy for us to do this, throw the corners up next, and then we'll come back here, lay these 3 end wall posts up, and as you can see there, Greg's just tying in those couple boards. So a couple things to consider when we are installing our end walls. First off, we can't put all of the lumber on very easily because, as you can imagine, standing up the wall, you're going to have your 2 side walls kind of in your way. So when we get to a smaller building like this, we're actually able to go ahead and install, for the most part, all of our lumber. And as we lift, you're going to watch us lift this. We kind of move it side to side just enough to kind of weave in and out of the post until we can get it all the way up. So you'll see here, first thing is we got to make sure that the bottoms are not attached to the brackets, otherwise it will kind of twist everything. So we kind of pulled it up, lifted it on an angle, and it just kind of slid right in. Another thing that I never covered was that our end wall girts, so the wall we're on right now, those wall girts, they're 2x6s, and we always cut them 1.5 inches shy of the outside dimension. So this being a 40 foot by 30 foot building, our sidewall girts will measure the entire 40 foot. These end wall girts will only measure 29 foot 9 inches, and that is so all of our sidewall girts overlap the end wall girts. And that is something that we do consistently on every job. So the bay that we're working on right now, that's an end bay. We call that our end bay on our end wall. And it's unique in that the girts are actually cut back 1.5 inches. So that bay is a 7 foot 6 inch bay. So center of post to edge of post is 7 foot 6. We actually cut them back at a 7 foot 4.5. So our overlap on our sides brings it to a nice corner. And hopefully that makes sense. I know in time lapse it's hard to get all of that, but it's also hard to film it all during, actually working, because I'm not just creating video, I'm actually working. But once we get the walls all stood, we just kind of come back in, and the only up in the air hand framing we like to do is just these boards that we have to use to tie in all of the wall girts. And you also notice that there's one less row on the end wall. That's because the next row up is the bottom cord of our truss. Whew. I almost feel like the heat's getting the best of us here, but we got 3 walls up, we got our end wall up. Now it's time to put our end wall truss on, and since we've got all of our materials cut, all of our purlins and everything else, we'll go ahead, we'll get these trusses all the way up, and then we'll come behind and we'll put all of our purlins. With a 30 foot wide building, you shouldn't have to do much bracing to your trusses if it's not windy, and you know, always be careful, always be safe. But we've done this a lot, and we won't need any bracing because we'll be right behind putting the trusses up, and we'll be right behind that with putting our purlins on. Now, when I say you don't need to brace the trusses, you should always use caution when installing trusses because they can fall, they can get away from you, and if you don't know what you're doing, take as many precautions as possible. We've done this a ton of times, and we know our comfort level is about a 48-foot wide truss. Once we get to a 48-foot wide, we have to make sure it is braced off as we're installing. But with a 30-foot wide, we can basically install these trusses just about as fast as I can go hook them with the skid loader and bring them back in. Once again, a great asset is that Cheyenne Teleboom. We're able to install up to a 60 wide truss on a 16-foot tall wall. It's a little bit hairy, but it is doable. Preferably, I would rather bring my telehandler in for anything over 16 foot tall or anything over 48-foot wide trusses. But I got to tell you, for these small buildings, the skid loader is just perfect. And one thing definitely to note is that we're not installing any of our purlins yet. We definitely could do that, and we would typically do that on a larger building, but I don't want to have to get in and out of the skid loader a million times every time we hang a truss. I'd rather just run them all out, connect them, and then we will go to the purlins after the trusses are done. Now that we've got our trusses up and secured, with 420 penny nails aside on each of these, you can see here where it's like a 3-ply column. The truss sets in the middle, and then it'll also get 2 1/2-inch through bolts top and bottom. That's a 15.5-inch heel. That dimension is 15.5 inches, and that provides a full R38 R value fiberglass in the ceiling, as well as it gives it a lot of strength side to side when we put those 1/2-inch bolts. Now what we're going to have here is these are our purlins. If you notice, let's see, down here we've already marked and pre-drilled these on the ground so that it'll be easier to drive a 60 penny ring shank nail through this on edge. It will go between our 8-foot on center trusses, and we're lining up this line with the center of our truss, and on the overhang out here we'll have a line on the purlin to determine our overhang. So we'll line up that line that we've marked at 10.5 inches. That'll overhang our end truss 10.5 inches, and then that will help create our overhang. So because this is so small, it's just as easy to throw these boards up. We'll grab them, take them up, spin them around, pound them in, easy. The scissor lift is probably more of a hassle than it's worth for this. Okay, so I'm assuming right now you're saying to yourself, well, our buildings, Kyle always talks about being efficient, working smarter, not harder, but also harder. And now he's got a scissor lift that he is not using. He's just going to do this all by hand and lift all these boards. Well, to be honest, it really, by time we load the lift, by time we unload the lift onto the roof, we have to push the purlins up the hill. It really just doesn't save us anything. Running purlins is really not that hard. We've already gone through and done a lot of the work on the ground. We've pre-drilled our holes big enough so that a 60 penny nail will be easily pounded through without splitting the board. And we've marked all of our purlins, so all we really have to do, and it's kind of hard to film this while up there, but all we're doing is we've got marks for the center of our trusses on those purlins, and we just have to line them up, nail them, and go on to the next one. We've also already taken the time and marked all of our trusses. So up on the tops of those trusses, there's a mark every 2 foot. And so what we like to do is we always come down 4.5 inches from the peak for our first purlin. That is there so that we can screw into it with our ridge cap. Then from there, every 2 feet down, we install another purlin. And these are 8-foot on center trusses. We're going to install our purlins on edge, and then we're going to put our 60 penny nail straight through the 3.5 inch measurement. So they're not laying flat, they're laying on edge, and we really can't do them on flat unless we were to narrow our truss spacing to 4 foot or less. Personally, we don't need to in our area. You should always check with your local snow load requirements. Have an engineer they're always going to engineer your trusses anyway. Don't just go buy some trusses at a lumber yard and think you can put them up like we do, 8 foot on center. Check, make sure that that's actually a doable thing in your area. Usually snow loadings is going to call out whether they can be 8 foot on center or less. For us, we're doing a 35-pound truss load, snow load, total load on these trusses, and that's going to give us a ceiling load and the proper snow loading for the top cord. Well, there we go. Not a horrible day. Didn't get started till after 10 o'clock, and it's really hot, but our trusses are up, our purlins are up, the 3 walls are up. Tomorrow, we will build the header for the garage door. That's a 16 by 10 garage door. We'll get going on grade board, we'll get our overhangs, our fascia boards, and we'll prep for steel on the roof. We should get to that roof tomorrow. Gorgeous, gorgeous day. Finishing off the day with getting all the, you can see here, it's a little dark. Getting the holes on the columns drilled. Those will get 1/2-inch through bolts. Like you can see back here. Now you can see here, we've already got our marks for our interior wall girts. Those are already on there, so we are good to go. Earlier, I don't know if you remember, was talking about these corner boards on our corner posts. So now you can see there's our wall girt marks. So we always run our end wall girts first, and we do that for a couple of reasons. But our girts will come from here across. Then we will come in with our sidewall girts and they will get nailed in. And the reason we don't just nail it all the way into this post this way first, which I know a lot of you might be thinking, well, Kyle, just run them this way. Well, reason being is that we like to run our insulation, our vapor barrier, and once our vapor barrier comes around this corner, it's easier to nail here. It won't mess with the vapor barrier, it won't cut it, it won't stretch it out. But if we were to run our boards this way, we wouldn't be able to get our insulation and our vapor barrier around it very easily, and it would reduce the amount of insulation in this area. So hopefully that makes sense. I felt like I just talked a lot, but it's a good day for us. We're gonna clean up, we're gonna get out of here. Thanks again, guys, for hanging out, and I sure hope you learned something. If you didn't and you still got questions, drop them below in the comments so I can answer them. Hit the thumbs up if you loved the video. Hit the subscribe if you want to stick around and learn more. But for now, we'll catch you guys in the next video.